Hey everyone, today we're going to be looking at a 2024 presidential election prediction between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. And a lot of people view this as a potential bid for the 2024 presidential race, and I would be one to agree. This seems like a likely possibility. Donald Trump has been teasing a presidential run, and while President Biden has been saying that he will run for re-election. Ultimately, his age really wouldn't align with that. However, we do know that Joe Biden is likely to run at the same time. So at this point, we're really just in a mix of will President Biden run, and ultimately, when will President Trump announce his bid? Because most likely, President Trump will run for President of the United States. So this is, of course, a matchup if Kamala Harris is the Democratic nominee and Donald Trump is the Republican nominee. And I think a lot of people want to see what this election would look like, especially after the Roe versus Wade overturning. Before filming this video, I went and searched up on YouTube and seen if I could find any popular videos regarding a race such as this since the Roe versus Wade overruling, and I couldn't. So I went ahead and I decided to make one myself, and I think that a lot of people will agree with this matchup. I think that ultimately it would be very contentious, a very contentious race, and I think that Donald Trump ultimately would really focus on states that he really needed. But it's enough of me talking, and we're going to go ahead and start characterizing some safe states for the Republicans. And I took a suggestion from one of my followers who suggested that I go ahead and start doing margins, and I ultimately agree, and I'm going to try to do them for most videos. Obviously, some videos are a little hard to do them. They take a little bit of extra time, but ultimately, I think that they are useful, like many people suggested on my video. They were like, you should do margins, and ultimately I agree. And I'm going to go ahead and characterize, or actually I'm not going to characterize the 2nd district and Nebraska yet, but ultimately we will characterize that at a later point in today's video. Hopefully I won't forget about that. But the next states that we're going to look at is safe Democratic states. So, California, Washington, and Oregon isn't a safe state because in my margins, as you will be able to see down below, safe I characterize as over 15 points. So ultimately, California and Washington would, but Oregon would be a little bit closer. Not saying that Kamala Harris wouldn't win it. Trust me, she is going to win it, but ultimately it would not be characterized as a safe state in today's video. But yeah, I want to know y'all's thoughts down below as well. What do you think this matchup would look like in a case that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump face off? Because ultimately, I think that there's a lot of characterization with this. I think there's a lot of opinions with this as well. And ultimately, I think that it's really important to view every option in this. So next, since I started characterizing safe states with the Republicans, I'm going to go ahead and characterize likely states for the Democrats first. So, we're looking at states like Colorado and Oregon. We're also going to be looking at states like Virginia. That would be characterized as more of a likely state, not a safe state. Sorry about that. But ultimately, these states are really states that, while we can't fully characterize them, they are likely to go to the Democrats. They're not going to go to a huge margin of over 15%, but ultimately, they will end up winning them as long as everything goes like of course, as planned. So these are more or less the states that we would consider likely Democratic states, and the next that we're going to characterize are likely Republican states. So states like Texas, states like Florida, states like South Carolina, also states like Ohio, and even Iowa, where, they're not going to win by huge margins, of course, but it is a pretty reasonable stance for the Republicans in these likely states. So, yeah, again, like I said before, I do want to hear your thoughts down below. What do you all think this race would look like? If you all have a map, tag me in a video of what your election prediction is, because I'm generally curious on what you all think this race would look like, because I really do think that this is a race that's ultimately kind of hard to predict. There's states like Michigan and others that we'll get into later on in the video, but are a little harder to characterize for the Republicans or for the Democrats. They're closer races, and ultimately it's harder to predict them, therefore. But the next states that we're going to talk about are going to be, lean type of Democrats, Democratic states that are leaning towards the Democrats. And in states like that, we're going to be looking at New Mexico, where, the Democrats perform pretty well in New Mexico, but it wouldn't be to the point that we would be able to say it's likely or it's safe even. Like I said before, safe would be characterized as a pretty large margin. I mean, we're looking at safe states as states that are going to the Democrats by 15 points. So obviously New Mexico and Colorado both aren't going to be those types of states. Ultimately, though, this is pretty much the prediction for that. I mean, ultimately, I have a lot of other states that we could characterize, but I think I'm going to wait for Minnesota and Michigan and some of those other states until later on in the video so that we can talk about those in depth on each of those. So the first state that we're going to talk about is the state of Nevada. Nevada has 6 electoral votes. The Republicans have been talking about flipping this state for the past 2 election cycles now, ultimately have failed to do so both times. Very, very close in 2016, though. I mean, very close. I mean, it was a 2.4 margin. Actually, it was the same margin in 2020. So they're getting closer compared to, Barack Obama's win in 2012, 6.7%, go to 2016. It flips, and 2020 stays the same. So ultimately, I do think that there's a high chance of this flipping by the time that we get to 2024, and ultimately Kamala Harris's approval rating, as we can see here, this was done towards the end of June, but obviously we can see that Kamala Harris is not favorable in the United States whatsoever. So the state of Nevada, 6 electoral votes. The Democrats are going to really focus on winning this race, right? I would agree that someone like Ron DeSantis, who I mentioned in another video where I had this matchup, Kamala Harris versus Ron DeSantis, I mentioned the fact that Ron DeSantis is a very good Republican candidate, and I think he could win more states than President Trump could in the 2020 election cycle. Obviously, it's clear that President Trump will most likely be running, but I do believe that Ron DeSantis would be able to perform better in certain states. But I am going to characterize, for the sake of this video, Nevada as a tilt Democratic state. This will be a close race, ultimately. And I think that the race ultimately will come down to the wire. And I think it's really going to come out to turnout and who turns out on Election Day and who votes on Election Day. What are those final results going to look like? Because ultimately, I think it's going to be a very close state and even very possible chance of the Democrats winning with a under 0.5 margin. So the next state that we're going to talk about is the state of New Hampshire, another state that Democrats have talked about. Republicans have talked about winning, but ultimately have not done so recently. New Hampshire went to Biden by 7.4 points. But if we look just 4 years prior, Clinton only won the state by 0.37. And I think this is going to be a race that comes down to the lesser of two evils. Now, obviously, if you're a Trump supporter, if you're a Kamala supporter, you're going to say that, I like Trump and I don't think he's evil. Oh, I like Kamala and I don't think she's evil. But ultimately, people in these suburban areas and areas that ultimately do not know who they're voting for, it's going to come down to Election Day and who is the lesser of two evils. Ultimately, in a lot of these people's opinions, that's probably going to be Donald Trump. Kamala Harris has such a low approval rating, and it's for multiple factors, and we could talk about those all day long, but obviously we don't have time in today's video to do that. But, it's going to come down to the lesser of two evils in that situation. So the state of New Hampshire, I think that ultimately the Democrats will win it, but I think it will be very, very narrowly. I think it will be the type of margin that it was in 2016. I think Clinton won it by 0.37%. I think Kamala Harris may be able to win it by a little bit more than that, but I think it will still be in that tilt type category for the Democrats. And that means it's a state that the Democrats really need to focus on. If they want to win this state, they need to focus on it because it's a state that's going to be very close. The next state we're going to talk about is the state of Minnesota. And I did not characterize this on purpose because I think this race will be close. I think Minnesota has a chance of going to the Republican Party. But in this video, I am going to characterize it as a tilt Democratic state. Now, let's look at Minnesota in 2016, went to Clinton by 1.5 points and Biden by 7.1 points. I think the same thing could happen, but I think the Democrats would narrowly win it even more than they did in 2016. I think it'd be very, very narrow in the state of Minnesota. And I think the Republicans have a high chance of flipping the state if they focus on it, right? The next state that we're going to talk about is the state of Arizona. Arizona is one in which, the Democrats won it in 2020. Biden won the state by 0.3%, and Donald Trump won it 4 years prior by 3.5%. And ultimately, I think that Donald Trump would end up coming out ahead in this race. And ultimately, I really think that it wouldn't be a lean state. I think it would be more of I don't think it would be a toss-up type of state. I think it would be more of a lean Republican state. I don't think that it's going to be one in which the Republicans just narrowly win it by under 0.5%. I think that ultimately this will be a lean state. It won't be a tilt state for the Republicans. I think that the Republicans will be able to win this by more than 0.5%. Let's next talk about Georgia, a state that the Democrats are definitely going to focus on going into this election. They won the state of Georgia by 0.2%. 4 years prior, Donald Trump won it by 5.1%. I think the Republicans are going to focus on it. I think the Democrats are going to focus on it. And ultimately, it's going to come down to turnout on Election Day. People aren't going to be enthusiastic about voting for Kamala Harris. They won't either for Donald Trump, but ultimately, Trump will have more of a factor in winning. And that's why I'm going to put Georgia as a tilt lean Republican race for Donald Trump. I think he would win it by a lean margin. The next state we're going to talk about is the state of North Carolina. North Carolina is one that Donald Trump won by 1.3%. 4 years prior, he won it by 3.7%. And I think that trend will continue. It could get narrower. He could expand his margin. I personally think he would expand it a little bit, but it would still be in that lean category. The next state that we're going to talk about is the state of Wisconsin. And if Donald Trump wins the state of Wisconsin, he wins the presidency. If he doesn't, he has the chance with two other states to win it, right? And we also have to characterize that second district in Nebraska. Sorry about that. But we will characterize that in just a moment. So let's go ahead and talk about this. So the state of Wisconsin is one that the Republicans are going to focus on a lot. That's most likely where the Republican National Convention is going to happen in 2024, and the state of Wisconsin is going to be one that they focus on a lot. Biden only won the state by 0.6%. If we look 4 years prior, Donald Trump only won it by 0.7%. I am going to put it in Donald Trump's favor. And I think it actually will be a lean. I don't think it'll be a tilt Republican. I do think it'll be a lean Republican, meaning that he'll have a little bit of expansion room if he was to lose votes in Wisconsin. He could have that tilt margin, but I'm going to put it as a lean Republican. The next state we're going to talk about is Michigan. Michigan is one in which the Democrats have performed well in the past few years. Trump won the state of Michigan by 0.2%. Biden flipped it back into the Democrats' favor by 2.8%. And ultimately, I really do think that the Democrats probably would win Michigan with the overturning, of Roe versus Wade. But I think it would be so close. It would be a tilt Democrat. I don't think it'd be lean. I think it'd be a tilt Democrat. I think the Democrats would only win it by under a half a point. For the Democrats. I do not think that they could win it by a huge margin. And the next state that we're going to talk about is the state of Pennsylvania, and then we're going to characterize that second district in Nebraska. The state of Pennsylvania, the Democrats won it by 1.2%. 4 years earlier, the Republicans won it by 0.7%. The Republicans will win Pennsylvania, and I think that they will win it by a lean margin. I don't think it'll be a tilt. I think it'll be a lean Republican margin. I think they're going to have a little bit of expansion room, but it won't be a lot. I don't think that it will be a tilt Republican. I do think it'll be a lean Republican in Pennsylvania. And this puts the Republicans at 291 electoral votes, the Democrats at 246. And the next state that we're going to characterize, or not state, but the district that we're going to characterize is that second district in Nebraska. And ultimately, if we look at this district, in 2016, this went to Trump by 2.2%, and 4 years later went to Biden by 6.6%. Ultimately, I think that the Republicans would win this district. And there's a multitude of factors in it, but I think that it would be a win for the Republicans, and I'm going to characterize it as a lean Republican, not a tilt, a lean Republican. And this puts Donald Trump at 292 electoral votes to Kamala Harris's 246. This would be a very narrow election night. And ultimately, Kamala Harris would win states like Nevada, Michigan, and New Hampshire. But Trump would win because he wins in Pennsylvania, he wins in Wisconsin, he wins in Arizona, and he wins in Georgia. I think that the key to winning are these 4 states. For Republicans, if they want to win, they have to focus on these 4 states. They can lose one of them in every circumstance. See, they can lose Pennsylvania, and they can still win the presidency. Now, I don't think that will happen, but they can have that happen, and they would still be put in an okay position. Thank you all so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. Let me know what you think of the margins. If I messed anything up, I'm really sorry. This is my first time doing the margins, and I probably did mess something up 1 or 2 times, but I apologize about that. I would love to know your thoughts down below on what you think this race would look like. Tag me in videos that you all may have made or videos that you've watched. I would love to watch them myself and see what other people have predicted this race would be like. Ultimately, I do think Donald Trump would be reelected in a non-consecutive term to be the 47th president of the United States. But again, thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe, ring the bell so you can get notified anytime we post a new video. Also, go follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. All of those social media handles will be linked in the description. And new as of this video, we now have a Discord server that you can join down below. I would love for you all to hop in there. We've just got it started, so bear with us while we get some final things figured out in there. But I would love for you all to go ahead and hop in. There's an area for you all to talk about the midterms, the 2024 elections, so many different cool things in there. You can get pings and different things. And over time, we'll expand the server to more broad. But for now, I think this is a good starting point. So yeah, go ahead and join that Discord server down below. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye.